Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. We are still on the road to 2,000 subscribers. So if that's a journey that you feel compelled to join and tag along with, please consider pressing that subscribe button down below. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future Milwaukee Bucks updates. All right, so now that the preamble's over, the Bucks fall at home to the Sacramento Kings. Whoever left a comment in the last episode saying, "Why are you being so dramatic?" Of course the Bucks are going to beat the Kings at home with Giannis returning to the lineup. Of course they will. The reason why I was dramatic, as you might say, is that practically before every single game, I go into it thinking that basketball over the past couple of years has started to develop more into a baseball kind of sport where it's like any team can beat any given team on any given night. And obviously, with baseball, it's a little more unpredictable. And now, basketball, just because of the sheer amount of talent that has entered the NBA and the fact that the league is so overwhelmingly talented, any team can beat any given team on any night. And this was the case against the Sacramento Kings and against Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis led attack where Zach LaVine has come into this season just completely scorching, on fire, 30 points a game, 50, 40, 90. And Sabonis, who's going to get his 13 to 15 rebounds a game, and DeMar DeRozan, who's going to get his 25 plus points a game. And those are three guys right now that you just can't really stop. But Zach and DeMar DeRozan, for instance, any game they could walk into, they could combine for 60. And DeMar DeRozan and Dennis Schroeder can also come in and combine for roughly 100 points among, other things and have 15 plus rebounds, 10 assists for each of them. So it's a level, like a 3 or 4 leveled attack for the Sacramento Kings, filled with players that are maybe not superstars, but are very, very accomplished and great in their roles. And this is including guys like Dennis Schroeder and even Russell Westbrook, who came in and gave them a triple double, or a double double with, I think it was 12 points, 10 assists. And I think the biggest thing about this game, other than the free throw disparity, we're going to get into that later, but the rebounding was a big part, even though it looks on the box score that the Kings maybe only beat the Bucks in rebounding by 1 or 2, but it was timely key rebounding and offensive rebounding, truthfully, that led to this kind of collapse for the Bucks, and the hot shooting going away in the like second and late fourth quarters and things like that. But the rebounding and offensive rebounding specifically, again, going against a guy like Domantas Sabonis, who is going to be gobbling up offensive rebounds, and even a guy like Russell Westbrook, who 3 of his 5 rebounds were offensive and were key timely rebounds. And those are the kinds of things that you have to clean up, especially against a team like this that's prone to beat you in that way. You need to end defensive possessions by grabbing the rebound, and that's just how it has to be. And just the fact that after the kind of beginning that we saw from this Bucks team where AJ Green and Gary Trent Jr. are just letting threes go without hesitation. They saw their first 1 or 2 go down respectively, and they just decided ever since then, the ball touches our hands, we're just throwing it up. And it went in. And with how insanely hot the Bucks started, you had to know that it wouldn't keep up the rest of the way. And I believe they said over the on the broadcast that there's going to be nights in the future, possibly, where the Bucks are going to throw up a bunch of 3 pointers, and most of them are going to go in, and that's going to be a very, very fun night. But this was not that night. Maybe it looked to be in the first quarter, but in the second quarter, it was a complete 180, and the Bucks shot, I think, 14% from the field, 12% from three. They made 1 3 in the second quarter alone. So that you just need to keep that kind of run going. And the one thing was that the Kings were still scoring in that first quarter. The Bucks hung 40 plus in the first quarter, but the Kings were also right there. And then and the fact is that they just kept scoring at a ridiculously efficient rate the entirety of the game. The Bucks were red hot to start, and then all it took was that second quarter where they could not muster any kind of offense, and then the Kings kept it going by shooting 56 or 59% in that quarter alone, and then immediately going into halftime it was 71-70, and that hot shooting in the first quarter was all for nothing. So it was just keeping up that kind of intensity on both ends that really are not doing that, that did the Bucks in, because once their hot shooting just turned into complete ice cold shooting, the Kings were still scoring at a consistent rate the entirety of the game. They did not have a single quarter where they shot poorly from the field. And compared to the Bucks having a quarter or a quarter and a half or so of poor offense, that's all it took for a Kings team again, with guys like Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Dennis Schroeder, Demonis Sabonis, to just completely get right back in the game, steal momentum, and then come away with a very close victory in the end. But really, the perimeter defense was just very, very, very rough. And especially for a guy like Cole Anthony, who had picked up, was it that he picked up his fifth foul or that he fouled out and then he got ejected? Um, I forget if he had reached 5 or 6 in that moment, but it was rough for Cole Anthony just because guys like Zach LaVine, guys like DeMar DeRozan, again, are guys that are like herky jerky. They're gonna back you down. They're gonna get you up with a pump fake and then jump into you for free throws. And that's just how they operate. And of course, Demonis Sabonis as well in the post. He's obviously super uber efficient at all times. That's another guy that did them in. And Dennis Schroeder, again, a very stop and start kind of guy that gave the Bucks perimeter defenders. I will say outside of Ryan Rollins, because of course we got another fantastic Ryan Rollins performance, but no one could handle DeMar DeRozan, no one could handle Zach LaVine, and especially with their tendency to drive towards the basket, especially with Zach LaVine, and force the issue and get their way to the free throw line and things like that. No one could stop him, and then with DeMar, no one could stop him because they just kept going for up fakes, and he killed them in the mid range as he's prone to do. So this was just a very, very tough game for the Bucks perimeter defenders, and just the fact that the Kings weren't even lighting them up from 3 point range, but that they just could not stop DeRozan in the post. They could not stop Zach LaVine stepping back for long twos or driving all the way to the rim, and Dennis Schroeder, who was masterful in the pick and roll, just getting everything that he could possibly want as the lead ball handler in the pick and roll in terms of him creating his own offense. He was just fantastic, and the Bucks perimeter defenders just needed to kind of get themselves back into shape throughout the entirety of this one, but they just could not seem to do it. Though Ryan Rollins again was fantastic on both ends of the floor, and this is the Bucks starting point guard moving forward. I'm sorry, Kevin Porter Jr., that you didn't really get much of a chance other than maybe 7 minutes in the first game of the season to prove that you should hang on to that starting spot, but it is Ryan Rollins. He is the starting point guard of this team moving forward, because he just, again, this is a word that I've used with him very often in recent weeks. It's just that he looks so unbelievably comfortable and confident in the way that he's just like growing into this mindset, like, yeah, I am the lead ball handler of the Milwaukee Bucks. It seems like he thinks that he belongs in that spot. And the more that he continues to kind of drill that mindset into himself, that, yeah, maybe I am deserving of this kind of play and being this reliable and having this much responsibility, it's only going to lead him further. But in a game like this against two really, really tough matchups in Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan. Even when Russell Westbrook came in, he kind of, gave Ryan Rollins a little bit of a problem in I think it was maybe early in the fourth quarter, where he was backing him down a little bit and then just got separation somehow, and it resulted in a wide open layup. The perimeter defense struggled in this one, just could not stop the Kings from getting whatever they wanted inside the 3 point line. That was the biggest thing, because we know with this Kings team, outside of guys like Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray when he's healthy, and Malik Monk when he's healthy, and Zach LaVine, of course, the 3 point attempts are not really going to be there. So this was a game where guys like Cole Anthony, guys like Ryan Rollins really had to put up a fight against DeRozan and his, back to the basket, pulling up in the mid range kind of play style, and Zach LaVine uh, taking guys off the dribble, and a lot of those matchups that Zach LaVine drew with AJ Green just didn't really end up panning out very well, though he did put up a fight in many instances. Going into this game, I was very fearful of a guy like Zach LaVine just being able to kind of stop on a dime, step back for three over AJ Green, and a couple of times those were the kind of results of several different plays. So perimeter defense needs to step up in any case. This is the main thing that I'm going to be taking away, other than the incredibly huge free throw disparity that I don't want to say fully led to the Milwaukee Bucks losing this game and letting it get away from them, because of course there were myriad of factors that led to this loss. But the free throw disparity was a huge one. It was 35 made free throws for the Kings on 40 attempts, and 20 free throws made for the Bucks on 31 attempts. That's just a killer when you're knocking down 20 of 31, the other team's knocking down 35 of 40. And it was, of course, in the second half, in the fourth quarter, when it just became a parade to the free throw line for, again, for DeRozan, for Domantas Sabonis as well. These are the things that the Milwaukee Bucks will have to control. And again, a lot of it is on the perimeter guys, just not going for DeRozan's fakes, or reaching a hand in on Russell Westbrook or Dennis Schroeder or Zach Levine, guys that are really crafty and know how to draw contact, know how to draw fouls, get their way to the line. These are things that just have to be cleaned up. And aside from that as well, there is some blame to be put on the front court, because when Domantas Sabonis, I think about 5 of his rebounds were offensive as well. After he grabs offensive rebounds and he's kind of backing down and throwing elbows underneath the basket, and guys are forced to foul him, that's really all you can do. And they just got unlucky that Domantas Sabonis happened to knock down all but one, I believe, of his 10 or 11 free throw attempts in this one. And that's also going to be a killer moving forward when um, they can't really stop any kind of like hulking centers underneath the basket without just kind of throwing arms over arms and just raking the guy down by the forearms, and forcing him to go to the line. Of course, that's what we see with prospective teams going up against Giannis, and that's exactly what guys like Russell Westbrook did, when Giannis was attacking the basket. Just send him to the free throw line. But being able to stop guys like DeMar DeRozan and Zach Levine is one thing, because those guys are just super crafty with getting to the line. But stopping Domantas Sabonis from getting to the free throw line is a whole thing entirely for guys like Miles Turner and Giannis to kind of focus on, and they just need to be able to defend a burly guy like that that's going to be trying to carve his way towards the rim. They just need to be able to defend these guys without fouling, and of course that's a very tall task when it's a guy like Sabonis. But this was something in the game plan, something that really should have been gone over by Doc Rivers and the coaching staff, that Domantas Sabonis is going to be trying to create contact as much as possible down low, and we just need to defend him without fouling. And just the Bucks' inability to connect on their free throws, especially not necessarily down the stretch, because Giannis really, he did kind of clutch up from the free throw line, and knock down his. He started 5 of 10, and I believe, did he finish 8 of 13 or somewhere around there? But he kind of clutched up at the line, but none of the other Bucks really did, or at least a key few. And something that I want to say beforehand too, before we get out of here, is that I also saw a comment like this, that Kyle Kuzma, like, I'm really wrapped up in Kyle Kuzma. And yes, I am. But also, what a fantastic game from Kyle Kuzma as well. He clutched up in the second half, and especially in the fourth quarter. And what I loved from Kuz in this game is that, and the reason why I talk about him is because if he's at his best, he is a major, major contributor to a winning Bucks team. If they can get him back to, maybe not necessarily to his peak, but if he is a solid contributor for this team, like that, he can lift this team to kind of another level. Um, but 22 points on the night. And what I loved about him was that in the first half, he was casting up threes and they were completely wayward and off, and just he did not have the right kind of stroke, and started off once again cold from outside. But in the second half, and especially in the fourth quarter, he just put his head down and went straight to the rim. And there was also a nice cut that he made in I believe it was the first quarter, maybe late in the first quarter, where I think it was Bobby Portis had the ball down low, or kind of in the mid post, and Kuzma realized that nothing else was going on, so he just decided to cut to the basket, caught it, finished for an easy layup. But Kuz in the fourth quarter was just driving to the rim with reckless abandon, putting spin moves on guys, drawing contact, and just he was being fearless, and he was knocking down all of his close range type shots. And that's the kind of Kuz that you want to see when his jump shot is not going down. But even in the fourth quarter, he hit a couple nice turnaround jump shots in the mid range, and he was just kind of on one. But that's something that I'm really looking forward to seeing, maybe if Kuzma can be a little bit more consistent on the offensive end. Of course, that was the whole deal and the whole thing that we're expecting from him to kind of shape up with. But yeah, it was just a really cool night seeing Kuz go for 22, and in the fashion that he did, just not settling for jump shots, and being aggressive driving towards the basket. But next up, the return to Indiana for Miles Turner, and this game coming up against the Indiana Pacers without basically their entire team, without Halliburton, TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nemhard. Did I say TJ McConnell already? They have basically their entire starting group and two key bench guys out. I think it was like 7 guys of their 15 were out for their last game against the Warriors, which they ended up winning to get their first win of the season. Going into this game, this will be a huge test for the Bucks because this will be, reiterating to them that they cannot take any opponent lightly in the NBA, especially a Pacers team that's coming off of their first win against a fully healthy Warriors team that was maybe not red hot going in, but playing extremely well going in, and Quentin Jackson and Isaiah Jackson and Aaron Nesmith went completely nuts along with Pascal Siakam. And the fact is that the Pacers still have guys that can make key contributions and still have a Pascal Siakam who can just take over on any given night, and Nesmith who can knock down 6 threes on any given night. And besides all of this, besides just not needing to take their opponents or needing to, yeah, right? I think I'm correct with what I'm saying. Not needing to, oh my gosh, not needing to take their opponents lightly and not playing down to their competition. Aside from that, this is going to be a heated game, or maybe not heated, but very emotionally charged game with Miles Turner returning to Indiana, and it might get chippy, might get a little feisty, of course, with the rivalry with these two teams over the past couple years. So things might be building up, and the one thing is that the Bucks can't let any of those extenuating circumstances and factors get into their heads and take them out of this game, because at the end of the day, this is a game that they need to win against a severely banged up opponent that just does not look like they did last year by any means. Like, they are a completely different team. They need to come out of this game with a win, and they can't let the return to Indiana for Miles, they can't let the fact that Siakam can go off for 30 on any given night deter them from coming away with this win. And after a loss against a Kings team where going in, of course, received comments saying, "Why are you so dramatic? Of course they're going to beat the Kings." It's not an of course they're going to beat the Kings. It's not an of course that they're going to beat the Pacers with just Siakam. Anything can happen in this NBA, this modern day NBA, and this will be another chance for the Bucks to prove that they can rise above those kinds of things. They can't play down to their competition, that they're going to be a serious team in the Eastern Conference this year, and they need to get this win in order to prove that. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. Once again, I've been Dean Simon, and before you go, leave that like, leave that comment down below, and subscribe. Still on that road to 2,000 subscribers, so if you want to join along, I would appreciate it. Also, turn on post notifications for future videos, and I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks!